Okay, this has to be absolutely insane. I have no idea what is happening in the video game industry or even this year specifically. We're only just a few months in already, and things have been going to hell in a handbasket faster than a cat on a hot tin roof. And the thing is, every single time something happens, there's always some sort of escalation tactic. And it turns out after yesterday's news, Nintendo has escalated to the highest possible level. That's right, we're talking about the Big N back at it again. Now here's the thing, I have had my criticisms about Nintendo for the last couple of months. How their insane inability to consistently go around and put out lawsuits against every other emulator on PC, whether it's Yuzu, Ryujinx, everything else across the board, and even going after GitHub directly to take down other emulators as well. Literally making all of these lawsuits at the same time while not putting any of their games onto the PC platform, even though they could make an absolute mint off of that space in the first place. On top of that, Nintendo has also gone around and sued the Palworld company, continually filing patents even while the case is going on and doing everything they possibly can to stifle actual innovation in the gaming industry. Yes, that's right, they want to be able to control capturing and throwing an item at an enemy. No, I'm not kidding. And Nintendo is doing this specifically while raising prices of the actual Switch 1, charging you $20 a pop for ROMs that they're selling back to you, and also asking you for a credit card to access a button on your controller, and at the same time sell you game key cards that don't have the game in them, or even provide the opportunity for you as well to physically own your actual games. Nintendo has dramatically been on a massive anti-consumer tear this past year. But the thing is, after yesterday's news, it looks like things are going to get even crazier, because Nintendo's lawsuit ninjas are going for the big leagues. According to Wario64, Nintendo is suing the US government over tariffs. Okay, all right. Oh my God. Listen. Look, I don't know what is actually going on at Nintendo, but this has got to be their biggest issue yet. This company has tried to sue everybody under the bus. They've gotten into lawsuits with Brazil. They've gotten into lawsuits with basically every other major online company and corporation. They've also gotten into lawsuits with Palworld, like we talked about before, filing patents, doing everything under the sun, and trying to shut down emulators. They've even gone ahead and knocked on people's doors because of the fact that Ryujinx was an emulator that existed in the first place and forced them to shut down on the back end. Now they're going after the US government. Bro, listen, look. Again, I don't get political on this channel. This has to be the most insane thing I've ever actually seen. I have never witnessed an entire company and corporation be this litigious at all in my entire lifetime. Imagine all the money Nintendo could be making if they went around and just made good games instead of trying to sue everybody into the actual dirt and ground. It would be ridiculous what they would have. The thing is, though, there's so much more happening on this back end because Nintendo is also the exact same company that raised the price of their Switch devices and even accessories due to these tariffs, citing exactly market conditions. Don't forget. Back in August of last year, Nintendo said this: pricing for the original Nintendo Switch family of systems and products will change in the United States based on market conditions, effective August 3rd, 2025. These include the Switch OLED model, the Switch Lite, and select Nintendo accessories. Other Nintendo products, including certain Switch 2 accessories, select amiibos, and the Switch Sound Clock Alarmo, will also see adjustments. And the thing is, that was back in August. Nintendo has also been facing massive criticism from their own actual investors simply because they're also thinking about raising the price of the Switch 2 due to the actual RAM crisis that is happening right now. An actual true market condition. Don't forget, Nvidia is the one making the boards for the Switch 2 and the Switch 1 as well, and they seem to be running the gambit on the RAM crisis in the space right now. Yet for some reason, the prices weren't increased due to this actual space, but they were increased on the Switch 1 and other accessories due to the tariffs as well. So that is going to be an interesting thing to see across the board. I don't see Nintendo trying to sue Nvidia now after creating the RAM crisis because of AI. Now, do we? Kind of weird when you think about it. The thing is, though, there's more to this story because the article from Aftermath, in fact, says this. Nintendo of America is suing the U.S. government over the sweeping tariffs President Donald Trump put in place last year, according to a complaint filed Friday in the U.S. Court of International Trade and obtained by Aftermath. Though the Supreme Court has stymied the tariffs for the time being, the situation remains in flux for companies manufacturing goods outside the U.S. and sent stateside. The Supreme Court struck down the tariffs on February 20th, but Trump vowed to impose new 15% tariffs on many global imports under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. 24 states are suing over the new tariffs. As of Thursday, more than 1,000 companies have also sued the U.S. government for what they say is the illegal implementation of these tariffs. Those companies include Costco and FedEx. So right off the bat, things are getting hot and heavy across the board. One thing I didn't know was that other U.S. companies are also suing the U.S. government. So this is going to get a little bit hectic and crazy. But the one thing that concerns me the most is how long these companies in fact waited for these actual lawsuits to take place. If you were actually being impacted negatively and had to raise prices and impact consumers, why wasn't this lawsuit done earlier across so many other places? What I think is happening now is that we are seeing prices increase and actual buying power decrease across the board, making it more difficult for companies to hit their actual metrics and quotas. Seeing as how the bottom line is now being impacted, they're trying to do anything they possibly can to try and recoup any sort of money that was lost due to rising prices. And look, like I said before in other videos, again, I don't get political. I'm looking at this from just a consumer perspective point of view. And also, I'm not an economist. I'm just a semi-fit himbo that does legs 4 times a week. I can crush a walnut with my glutes. But anyways, that tangent aside, what I think is actually happening is, like I said before, companies are seeing their bottom lines fall. People have less purchasing power than ever. And the thing is, these companies don't want to lose any money whatsoever. It's one thing to deal with a RAM crisis happening in the space, something that you cannot tangibly contain or control, seeing as how every other major company is also dealing with this too. It's on the opposite end of the spectrum when you have an actual government imposing tariffs on you, which you then have to raise prices for, that you can fight back with. And I think that's why we're seeing all of these lawsuits happen exactly all at once, and Nintendo is joining in the fray. Like I have to make clear before, these companies do not care about you. They care about one thing and one thing only, their massive bottom line, and they're going to do whatever they can to in fact protect it. But the article goes even further, so let's check back in. Nintendo of America's lawsuit is largely targeting refunds of the previously imposed tariffs that the Supreme Court struck down. The Supreme Court found that Trump could not invoke the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 to put the tariffs in place. Nintendo of America's lawyers list the U.S. Department of the Treasury and the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and former Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, Office of the United States Trade Representative and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, U.S. Customs and Border Protection and Protection Commissioner Rodney Scott, and the U.S. Department of Commerce and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. Brother, they're going after everybody. Holy, this is a whole game right now. Look, listen, I'll tell you what, this has to be the most insane thing I've ever actually seen. And I really want to see what in fact pans out about this. The Nintendo ninjas, boy, they don't play apparently. Them boys are going after a small time with GitHub and emulators. They were just messing around doing whatever they wanted. Going after the US government is not going to be an easy feat whatsoever. And I think this is going to be impacting not only Nintendo, but in my guesstimation, basically every other major company that does business in the US as well, or even ships to the US on top of this. But the thing is though, it's still not done, because clearly Nintendo is on a warpath. with the article saying, quote, "This action concerns defendants' initiation and administration of unlawful trade measures to have, to date, resulted in the collection of more than $200 billion in tariffs on imports from nearly all countries," lawyers write in the complaint. The U.S. Court of International Trade has jurisdiction over civil issues relating to customs and international trade law in the country. That's where all these lawsuits are being litigated, and where Customs and Border Protection told a judge that it collected $166 billion in tariffs as of Wednesday, per CNBC. On Wednesday, Judge Richardson Eaton ruled that companies are entitled to refunds, but on Friday, Customs and Border Protection said in a filing it can't currently comply with the order to refund tariffs. I'll tell you this, Nintendo wants one thing and one thing only. They want their money. Apparently, it's not about the tariffs themselves, but about the refunds that were supposed to be given back to Nintendo, totaling $200 billion collected by the actual Border Patrol agency. That is wild. If Nintendo's going to do anything they can, they're going to get their money one way or another, come hell or high water. This is the same company that literally created variable rate pricing for their games and jacked up pricing of games to $80, betting that you'll pay for it. And bet right, they absolutely did. Every single Nintendo Disney adult went out and bought those games at $80, went out and bought a more expensive Switch 2, and are literally sitting there talking about, well, I don't know about the games, you guys. Well, apparently you got what you wanted. There it is. And Nintendo's going to keep squeezing every penny out of every possible person they can, getting every single dollar. And now they're suing the actual US government for those refunds on those tariffs, and they want that money. This is wild. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to play out, but apparently there's even more to what Nintendo is talking about and even more information on the actual complaint. Through several pages of the complaint, Nintendo lawyers recount the tariff situation beginning on February 1st, when Trump issued the executive orders imposing new tariffs. The months that followed were chaotic. The situation changed rapidly as tariffs were increased, paused, then increased again. Tariffs reached over 125% for goods from China, before those were reduced to 34% in May. Throughout multiple legal challenges, the Trump administration continued to impose these tariffs, Nintendo lawyers say. That's in violation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. Nintendo lawyers say, and why they are entitled to a refund of the tariffs paid during this since February of 2025. Saying, quote, "All tariffs collected under the IEEPA duties must be refunded with interest," lawyers write. They say the government has, quote, "conceded this point in other documents." Them Nintendo boys want everything. They want all the money back and with interest. Look, listen, I'll tell you what. People have asked me, hey, Alex, can you do some more emulation videos about the Nintendo Switch? No! Are you out of your mind? Hell no, baby. That is gone. Oh my God, dude. Them boys want everything back with interest from the U.S. government of all people, sitting there and making that lawsuit straight up. And the thing is, like I said, I don't really care about political stuff. All I care about is from the perspective of a consumer. I've had to pay more money for my products, and companies had to raise their prices to sit there and try and fuck me because of it. And clearly it doesn't matter what kind of product I want to buy. I just don't want it to be this actually expensive. I'm not buying new GPUs. I'm not buying new CPUs. I'm not buying Nathan across this board. And these companies are actually sick of it. And they're tired of spending all that money and not getting anything in return, jacking up the price on consumers, and then not getting any buying power at all. And I think that's where things are going to catch a breaking point. Nintendo, I feel, is not getting the actual kind of money they were expecting from the Switch 2, either because of sales or because of the actual product itself, or even on the other hand, the extra money they're having to pay due to tariffs to offset those costs, and because of the actual RAM crisis that Nvidia is also in fact a part of. Remember, they've talked about increasing those prices on the Switch 2 already before, but they're not at that breaking point just yet. And I think that's where things are going to get really wild. They're scrambling to grab every piece of cash they possibly can, and the fact that they want it back with interest on that refund from those tariffs pretty much exposes that directly. I think the funniest part about all this, though, are the reactions we're seeing online. Big T on Twitter said this: Nintendo's lawyers versus the United States. Hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby. Yeah, look, I gotta be real about this. As someone that has really enjoyed emulation for quite some time and seen everything going on, this is going to be a real scary fight. If the Nintendo lawyers can actually pull something like this off, it's going to set a precedent across every other major company that has been dealing with those tariffs, not only with Nintendo, but also with PlayStation, Microsoft, AMD, and everybody else in the tech space. That's going to be something incredibly wild to see. And clearly, Nintendo's lawyers have had a pretty impressive track record, if you want to look back at basically any other kind of lawsuit that happened. But the only one still standing in their way in terms of lawsuits is in fact the Palworld devs, and that is still having to be opened right now, but we'll see how that turns out. So they may not be the undefeated everybody thinks they are, and I want to see what happens. With Woodspider on Twitter saying this: first time in history where Nintendo's taking legal action and everyone's cheering. Poe Ghost on Twitter says, finally, one of their dipshit lawsuits I actually support. Mike Soul also says, Nintendo just unleashed the ninjas on the US government. Well, chalk one more off the didn't think I was going to see this happen this year list. And you know what? I don't think anybody expected this kind of thing either. Now, look, let's be real. Like I said before, Nintendo's lawyers are not ones to be messed with. And also, they're not the nicest people either. And neither is Nintendo. This company is not suing the US government out of the goodness of their hearts to stop tariffs. Remember, they're doing it to get their refund back with interest. They don't care about the economy. They don't care about you as a consumer. They will literally charge you more money every single time, even after the tariffs go away. They'll use that as a market condition and then try to sit there and coerce you to spending more money by using variable rate pricing. They're doing this lawsuit to get their money back from the US government that they in fact paid, and there's nothing more about this at all. Don't try to make it more political than it has to be. On the surface level, it may seem like they're trying to go up against the man, but in reality, all they want is their sweet, sweet cash, and that's exactly what they're trying to go after. Remember, Nintendo has also set their lawyers out on many other people, trying to get money back that literally didn't even exist. And there have been times when Nintendo, in fact, didn't get anything at all. Remember, there was also that one streamer that went around telling Nintendo to basically piss off about streaming all of their games early. In the end, he only had to pay around $17,000 for actual damage, even though Nintendo was seeking money in the millions. They're also still going up against Palworld and putting out basic, bogus actual patents while the case is in fact going on and getting them approved. Nintendo is not your friend. They are not suing the US government to stop the big old bad guy. They're suing them to get their money back, and they will screw every person they possibly can over and even drag you as far as possible to go ahead and get the red cent out of your back pocket. Don't be fooled by them. Because again, Nintendo was perfectly fine with paying the tariffs and raising those prices. What they want back is the refund with interest. So clearly, they were more than happy of jacking the prices up as long as they made that money. So again, don't fall for it. Corporations are not your friend, and neither is the government. Because I'll tell you this, if the RAM crisis keeps getting worse, they'll still keep raising those prices even afterwards, trying to make as much money as possible. And then when the AI bubble in fact bursts, they'll keep the price that high because you've been accustomed to it. But either way, I definitely want to see what happens, and I'll be reporting on more of this story as it continues to develop. So if you want to see more of this kind of content though, more PC port reviews, gaming news, Steam Deck videos, fanboy content, and even live streams, subscribe to the channel. If you guys want Discord access or emotes during those live streams, become a YouTube member. It's as low as $1. If you don't want to spend the buck, don't sweat it. Just come on down Saturday nights, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, live right here on the channel as I wear a banana suit and get insulted by about 800 people with TTS. Saturday nights, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, live right here on the channel. It's a hell of a show. You don't want to miss it. And speaking of not missing anything, here in fact is the comment of the day from yesterday's video. With Memes 4195 saying this: the RAM crisis is so bad, I bought a 4TB NVMe 4 days ago for $550. The next day it was $658 on Amazon. Oh yeah, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, Memes, so buckle up and get ready. And if you're in the market to buy something or you're planning on doing it, personally, I think you should pull the trigger as early as possible and then save it and make sure you take care of it, because clearly things are gonna go from bad to worse. But with all that being said, as always, I want to say thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you gooners next time. Peace!